you, your shining faces.
Appreciate you guys being adaptable.
Okay, volume wasn't working. Hi, Michelle, you made it.
I did. Thanks, Valerie.
Yeah, it's a little, the first time you do one of our meetings, it's a little bit like, wait, how do we?
You'd think that all these Zoom meetings would be exactly the same, but they are not. And
Well,
then
we'll be in good practice since this will be the next few months.
Yep. Yes. All right, getting more folks coming in.
Hey, Doug,
Hello, everybody.
how you doing?
Doing well. How about you?
Good. You've been in our thoughts.
Thank you. Everything's going okay. There's a lot to
Good.
do as always,
Yeah,
but it's going well. Thank you for all the kind thoughts. Appreciate it. I'm gonna go grab a quick water.
and Paul, we're sorry we're not there with you. We asked you to host it, and then we didn't show up at your party. I'm sorry.
I feel like what am I going on? Come on. Yeah, actually, it was I worried about I thought last night you should probably cancel because the weather was really bad. Although it's really nice today, but it's going to be bad again tonight. So
It is. It's a tough trip in the broad daylight, but boy, at night and I know going to Reedsport and last night I was coming from Lincoln City.
oh yeah.
You just can't see those branches or anything down.
Yeah, it's really windy too. So probably it was probably wise.
Yeah.
We missed it. We'll do it again though.
Okay, it's a deal. Hey, Maureen.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Paul, you got some nice weather out here.
Oh, are you over here?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't bad today, actually. Man, last night was a bear.
Well, that's saying something because Route 6 was no walk in the park.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, no, I think it was a good call to do it via Zoom.
yeah. Nighttime, at this time, nighttime,
Yeah,
that's safer for folks. So thanks for
agreed.
everybody's flexibility. Really appreciate it.
Yep.
I'm going to hopefully stay for most of this meeting, but with heavy rain, my internet goes in and out. So if I disappear, that's why.
Can you still hear us at all, or it just totally goes out?
It totally goes out, and I have no cell service when I have no internet. So
Maybe you could put an umbrella over your modem.
Okay, I think we have everybody that we're expecting now, so we'll call the meeting to order. And again, thank you everybody for being so flexible and joining virtually. So with that, I'll hand it over to Valerie to do the roll call.
Thank you, Board Chair. I'm going to go ahead and read out your name. Please unmute now and say here or I suppose, once you hear your name. Becky Timchuk,
Here?
Chris Riley,
Here?
Dorian Russell,
Here.
Doug Dougherty,
Here.
Ernest Stevens,
Here.
Maureen Wolf,
Here.
Michelle Graham,
Here,
Paul Jarrell.
Here.
And we know that Miriam Meneses Rios is absent this evening.
And is excused.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Moving forward, since we're going to be having the next 4 meetings virtually, I think it's kind of awkward to do the Pledge of Allegiance when we're all seated and we're not looking at a flag. So just know in spirit we have said our Pledge of Allegiance. But we will open with our land acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge that we gather as the Northwest Regional ESD on the traditional lands of the Chinook, Clatskanie, Clatsop, Nehalem, Kalapuya, Siletz, and Tillamook peoples, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself, the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. And so with that, I will ask the board, are there any revisions or to the agenda? Any additions, reviews?
Madam Chair, from the administration, there are no changes. I will add that there is a new slide that the attendance folks wanted to add in and actually revise. So I'm sure they'll let you know when they hit it in their presentation. But other than that, we are good to go.
All right, board members, any additions or changes?
None
All
for me.
Okay, with that, we will turn it over to Superintendent Goldman to give us his superintendent's report.
Okay. Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. It's good to see everybody here online. As you can tell from my report, I wrote it actually on election day, and we didn't post the board packet again until I believe it was Thursday. But honestly, I was too exhausted to rewrite the report. And there was still a number of contests regarding the election that were too close to call. So when I penned it, we were awaiting results. And I did mention here that we've sent a few things out to staff before the election and since the election, just to help people hopefully process what happened nationally, but also to have our attention focused here more locally, and to reiterate the role of public educators and public servants in a time when there's so much polarization. I've been in a number of school programs, was in the Hillsborough Early Childhood Center today. I was also at the Tillamook Service Center today. And I would just say that the staff, for the most part, are feeling pretty exhausted. I think there's just a sense of exhaustion and from this election period. And I also saw just amazing things between staff and kids. So our staff are showing up for kids. They are the models of care and belonging that we know we need from our public educators. And I'm just super proud of our Northwest Regional ESD staff. They model civility and they are all in for kids here at the ESD. So I was very pleased to report that to the board. We have held some space for people because tensions really do run very high around these types of events. And we have a number of planned activities coming up where staff can meet in affinity spaces and try to process what these election results mean for them and how we can continue to show up for kids in our settings. And as I speak to you all, I'm on Tillamook, and just to give a sense, I often, when I talk to legislators or other folks who kind of need to know a little bit more, want to know more about ESDs, I often say we are the largest and we are the most diverse ESD in the state of Oregon. And diversity is, a catch-all for all kinds of differences in our society. One of them is political. So I'm talking to you from Tillamook County, where the electorate voted for Donald Trump. Up north of me is in Clatsop County, and the electorate voted for Kamala Harris. You go around the bend on the river to the east, Columbia County voted for Donald Trump, and Washington County, when you come down to the Hillsborough area and our headquarters, voted for Kamala Harris. And so, as I said in the board packet here, whether you won or you lost, what really matters, especially as public educators, is and what side matters is the side of being there for others. And so I'm very pleased that we are trying to be there for others as people process the election. We do have in the local side of the election, not a ton on our local lawmakers, but we do have a new representative in House District 31, Darcy Edwards, and Darcy's a Republican, replacing a Republican. And we also have a newish state representative in Sharon Jones Isidore, and she's a Democrat. So even more locally, we have Tiger Tualatin School District, which was our only district that had a local option or a bond on the ballot. They had a local option renewal on the ballot, and it passed handily. Very proud of the Tiger Tualatin community. Of course, the board knows that I worked in Tiger Tualatin for some time. Always been such a amazing community for kids, and is very proud of that election. And then, of course, we have our own celebration right here on the screen. We have Director Wolf, who got reelected to the Tigard City Council. So, and not only got reelected with the most votes out of it was a select 3, and Maureen was the top vote getter. So congratulations, Maureen, and it couldn't happen to a better person and a better leader for Tigard. I'm very proud of you. Tonight, the board is going to meet our newest administrator out here in Tillamook. Of course, it was kind of planned that we would be in Tillamook and you'd actually get to meet David Goodell in person. He's the first new administrator in the Tillamook Service Center catchment in more than 12 years. As Kim Lyon is now the assistant superintendent in Tillamook School District. So very pleased about that. David will be online with us today. He is joining us from the Tillamook School District, where he's been a special education teacher and administrator at Trask River and Wilson River High Schools, kind of the alternative programming here in Tillamook County. More than 20 years of experience. And as I mentioned today, I was at the Tillamook Service Center. I got to go into a bunch of Better Together early learning classrooms. David was out front meeting parents as they came in. I'm very excited to have him on board. And so I know the board will get to ask him all kinds of questions here in a little bit, but I wanted to welcome David myself. Flipping some gears here into statewide advocacy and kind of the establishment of legislative priorities. This morning, I was joined by Becky, Director Tim Chuck. Thank you for joining myself and Stacy Rager, Leanne Chappell, the principal at Hillsborough Early Childhood Center, and Kelsey was with us, of course. And we met with Senator Salmon this morning and did some classroom visits, talked about the needs in our early intervention, early special education programs, and asked for a couple of things from Senator Salmon. This is a repeat. We are doing individual tours with some of our senators and representatives who are in particular positions that need to know more about early intervention and early childhood special education. So I thought it was a very good visit. We met with Courtney Neron earlier, and Susan McLean also earlier last week, and all visits were there. The folks are asking very good questions, giving us really good feedback, and are committed to education. So these are folks who really want to see education thrive in our state. I'm also working this year, as the board knows, I'm the president of the Oregon Association of ESDs, the statewide association. And part of my lift this fall was to get all the EIECSE contract holders coalesced around a solid and a singular list of advocacy priorities. One thing that has really hurt us in our advocacy in the past is each region has talked to the legislators, oftentimes legislators who cross over regions and have different asks. And it's very all-consuming for a legislator who also has every single sector from private industry to other parts of the public sector and other constituents asking for very detailed things. And then we come with very detailed asks that are sometimes not aligned. So I'm very pleased that all the contract holders have coalesced around the 4 bullets that you see in my board report. One is to get adequately funded. And we really wrote this as a basic level of funding, $432.8 million. We call that basic. The state is calling that adequate. And just so the board knows, when the state says adequate, it's kind of their like fulfilling the full promise of early childhood special education and early intervention services. Every contract holder in the state, almost every contract holder, and we do things a little differently across the state, recognizes that adequate number needs to get reevaluated. It's a very old formula for coming up with adequate or current service level. And we are urging, one thing that we're urging is that ODE studies that formula, because adequate for us is really just getting back to a basic and normal level, normal meaning like the last couple of years level of service here in the state. So we're urging this number of 432.8. We are also urging that the Student Success Act is additive on top of the general fund commitments that the state has for this program. Right now, the general fund allocation to EIECSE has gone down the last few years while enrollment has gone up. And really the Student Success Act has been used to backfill that disinvestment in the general fund. So we want to make sure that the promise of the Student Success Act is additive and not used to supplant the general fund. And then we have these 2 last issues. I'm not going to go through these terrible detail, but the third one here is the idea that we don't get funded up front for this program. So it's right now it's a reimbursement grant, which means that we actually have to provide the service and then put a request in basically to ODE and then get reimbursed for the services. That made sense maybe 25 years ago when this was a very, very small program. This is not a very, very small program. We have hundreds of staff across the state who are dedicated to early learning and special education. And the last biennium, we didn't get paid until February, maybe even March, which means that we had to cover somehow the cost of the program, and we almost didn't meet payroll. So it was very stressful. It's not just us, it's across the state. So that's a really big one for us. And the last one is to align the way that we start having conversations about the current level of service in the same way that we do the state school fund, which is now gotten a lot of attention. And I'm sure the board has kept up with that conversation. So we have a lot more coming up. Tomorrow, I'll be meeting with our district superintendents. We are going to be putting together our final list of priorities for other major state contract like regional inclusive services and some other priorities. I am going to bring that to the board in December so the board can see what our regional superintendents are advocating for and weigh in. We have a number of other things going on here around legislative advocacy. I'm not going to read those dates to you, but we are looking forward to pushing hard for the funding that these programs require. I did put a very early report on PERS for the board's attention. Today, the Capital Examiner, I believe, is the paper of record down in Salem, and there was an estimate on the total increase required to cover the cost of PERS for the next biennium, and it was, I believe, they're not right in front of me. I want to say it was around $650 million, maybe $670 million, just to basically maintain the same level of staffing that we have right now. That is like just basically sunk costs into next biennium that are going to occur. And without addressing that, obviously, without additional revenue, that's going to mean significant reductions across the state in our education workforce. There's a couple of reasons for, and I put some granularity in the report, which I don't want to read to the board. There are some specific reasons why this PERS increase is particularly damaging this year. And it's mostly around districts that had side accounts. So in other words, they took other loans and bonded their PERS in prior years, and the performance in those side accounts mirrored the market. But the PERS in general, the full PERS load was a pretty conservative investment strategy, and it underperformed in the market significantly from 2022 to 23. And so when you put those side accounts, which are now coming off the books, into the big pool, and the pool has been depressed, the results are significant. And we have, in our region, we have Gaston and St. Helens have the biggest hit, as you see there. There are districts in the state that are talking like 15, 16, 17% increases to their PERS rate. And it's not, these aren't just percentage increases. This is like 17 cents on the dollar for every dollar, right? So if a staff costs $100,000, we're talking $17,000 additional right off the bat without including any other benefits. So these are real impacts to our budget. It's pretty scary stuff. I did put here what our projected increase is going to be in some of our bigger funds. You'll see that EIECSE, which we talk a lot about these days because of the funding challenges, just right away, we're $526,000 short next year if nothing's done about PERS. The good news is that the governor has worked very hard with advocates, including COSA and OSBA, et cetera, to rework and really look at what the current service level projection, like the calculations, will be going into the next biennium. This has been it's been like 15 years of, at least since I've been an administrator, probably before that, of trying to get the state to recognize true costs when we roll up into a next biennium. The governor is committed to really making some big adjustments there, but I think this PERS number is so large that the state is really going to struggle to figure out how to do that current service level, which is about $550 million more automatically, plus this 670. And then you just look at the forecast and what the state budget is, and it gets pretty tight pretty fast. So that's the lay of the land on PERS as we know it right now. Jordan will be doing a finance report later, and I'm sure we'd be happy to speak to that with more specificity at the board's request. Lastly, I did, well, not lastly, I'm going to speed it up here. State assessments came out. They are, again, I think a fairly demoralizing look at Oregon results on the Smarter Balanced Assessment. I didn't write it here, but what goes through my head every time I talk about the Smarter Balance is that we are one of the only states in the nation that allows families to opt their children out of this assessment. We do have quite a few opt-outs. A large percentage of kids opt out of this assessment. So it's very difficult to look at this assessment as a valid measure, but it is the only assessment we have statewide to look at some critical things like third grade reading etc. So the overall state picture was down to flat, but after many years of declining scores, there are some bright spots that I did want to highlight here. Vernonia is seeing its scores rise, jumped more than 10 percentage points. Neocani, just north of where we are right now, had a major, a very large jump in third graders. Last year, you can see the data there. I'm not going to read the report. So, a very big jump in Neocani. Last year, Scappoose had a very, very nice jump and maintained those gains. So we are seeing some growth here in our region, and I'm very proud that the districts that are seeing these kind of gains are working with us and our team. Ryan Blasquez, who's going to be with you talking about attendance, leads our literacy work as well, and our districts are highly engaged in that work. Okay, really lastly now, our construction progress in the Columbia County Meadowlark program, which is our social emotional learning school, our new school. This is a concept that has been way more than a decade, basically Columbia County trying to get a really high quality program to serve kids with very, very intensive needs. We are in partnership, as the board knows, in making that happen. We will have our first students the week of Thanksgiving in the therapeutic program. So that's going to be our highest tier program for kids who need a very, very high level of support. We are already running 2 classrooms for the St. Helens School District for kids with high behavior needs. This is going to be the countywide program now that we're going to open up after the construction is done. I wanted to congratulate Caitlin Fries. She's been working overtime to try to make this thing come together. I got an opportunity to do a little fun video with Caitlin. We're going to be releasing that soon, and I'll make sure the board gets a copy of that as well. Lots of events coming up at the ESD. This is just a smattering. We had a professional learning newsletter went out today, and I started to click around, and there is just an amazing amount of work that we're doing in community with our districts, our early learning partners, and other partners in the region. It's very, very proud of the work that we do. And with that, I am happy to take any questions from the board.
Are there any questions for the superintendent? Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a question, Dan, but I do have a statement, I guess, or I just would like to commend you on you're working with the employees of the ESD in light of the election results. I mean, most of us on this call are lifelong educators, and we know what significant changes in the landscape mean with the work we do. And I think, to your point, staying laser focused on the outcomes and the kids and the students is what makes it all worthwhile. But again, I just thank you for acknowledging that there are challenges ahead, but that you're committed, and I certainly am as a board member committed to staying laser focused on our mission and meeting the needs of the kids. So thank you for your words, Dan.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, with that, we'll move on to recognition and good news. So Kelsey, if you'd like to share the good news with us, that would be great.
She is on her way in.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Timchuk, and good evening, board members. Unfortunately, you're not here with us in Tillamook County to meet David in person, but we are bringing in virtually David Goodell, who is our new service center principal for Tillamook County. We're excited for the opportunity to introduce the board to him, give you all a chance to welcome him to the team, ask questions about what he's looking forward to his in his new role, or whatever other kind of questions you might have. As Dan had mentioned, he joins us from Tillamook School District, where he was a special education teacher and administrator at Trask River and Wilson River High Schools, and has 20 years of experience in education, largely special education, life skills, and transition classrooms. So we are super excited to have that kind of expertise, compassion, and experience on our team. With that, I'm scrolling through. David, before I hand it off to the board, for any remarks they have or questions. Yes, there you are. Do you have anything else to share?
Oh, thank you so much, Kelsey. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, it's just an absolute privilege to be with you guys tonight. It's an unbelievable opportunity for me and my family, and been associated with the Educational Service District for a long time. Got a lot of my training as a special education teacher through you guys, and it's always been a dream of mine, to be in this position. So when the opportunity came, it was still have to pinch myself because this is just a real blessing for me, and was really looking forward to meeting you guys in person. I live in Rockaway. We had a tornado that came through and knocked everything out in Rockaway, and so lots of thunderstorms down here. It's kind of sketchy, but it's a privilege to be with you guys tonight. So thank you so much. It means a lot to me. So
Well,
questions?
David, so welcome. And again, we're so sorry we're not there in person. We're gonna look forward to the next time around where you can, host us at Tillamook with ice cream and cheese and all those. But welcome, welcome. And board members, are there any questions for David? Paul.
Thank you, Chair Timchuk. David, welcome to Tillamook. I won't have to drive so far to come see you, so we'll get together. Love to sit down and chat and welcome you properly in person. And sorry we had a little bit of bad stretch of weather here the past 24 hours, 48 hours, but welcome. Look forward to working with you.
Oh, thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. And I look forward to working with you as well. We're about a quarter of a mile away, so we'll definitely get together very soon. So, and we will have ice cream when everybody comes to Tillamook and treat you guys really well. So keep that in mind.
Any other questions? I guess I'll just ask, can you, I know but you are from the Tillamook School District and moving into this position. Is there anything you want to share with the board here of how we can best support you or perhaps what, you foresee some of your, maybe right off the bat sort of challenges?
Well, I want to give a shout out to Stacy and Megan and Dan. They've, really got me going with the onboarding. Has been tremendous. The entire staff has helped me out from, Hillsborough and Tillamook, the local staff. And so that's been amazing, how quickly they've gotten me up to speed with everything. I think for me, it's just getting better every day, driving forward, trying to be the best version of myself and lead my staff and ultimately leave our young children into the elementary school once they leave us. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's kind of what I'm looking forward to the most. A lot of my skills that I've acquired in education have been at the secondary level. I also worked at through the Oregon Youth Authority for adjudicated youth. So I think a lot of that experience, I think, is going to come into play. It's just kind of marrying that with the young children and the services that we can provide. So that's what I'm looking to.
Well, that's great. So we look forward to hearing the progress and how the students are thriving there. But again, welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Okay, the next order of business then is public comment. Board Secretary, do we have any public comment with us this evening?
Board Chair, we have no public comment this evening.
All right. We'll move on to the next order of business, and that is the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Great. And Ernest, did I see a second there?
Second.
All right. So it's
Yes,
been
I second.
properly moved and seconded that we accept the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Maybe I'll have you raise your hand, so that'll be easier here going forward. And then any opposed? Any abstentions? With that, motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to reports and discussion. First up is Strategic Planning Action Plan. Brian, are you with us?
He's coming in.
All right.
That working there? All right, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. I assume you can hear me?
Yes.
All right, and we did not discuss this. Are you able to see the slides as well? Or should I share those?
We will get those shared. Thank you.
Okay. I'm here to speak to you today a little bit about action plans, which is really the work of our departments to bring the strategic plan to life. As you're aware, the board adopts the strategic plan, and we're in the 6th year, I believe, of our current strategic plan. And this is our fifth year. And the action plans are really annual plans that departments put in place to move that work forward. I'll give you a quick overview of action plans and then talk about some of the improvements that we made to the process this year. Go ahead.
Brian, we are unable to share at this moment. If you can share,
Give that a shot.
we would appreciate that.
I think I got them here. Slides.
Apologies, board chair, for the interruption.
This over here. Sorry, now we're juggling screens. And the lights went off. How fun is that? I don't know if y'all caught that, but the moment I shared, my lights went off.
Don't we miss virtual meetings so much? No.
So much fun. Okay, overview of action plans, some improvements we made to the process this year. All right. Purpose of an action plan is really just to provide a clear and detailed roadmap for achieving objectives. Leaders and their departments get together and determine what actions they need to take to move the work forward. Right, that's an action plan. And I put the laboratory design flower lotus on there because a lot of this work aligns very closely with what we do in our laboratory design modes. And I'll discuss that a little bit later. It's really a continuation of the ESD's vision. We have a vision, it sets a direction for the entire organization, and through the action plans and leaders setting their own goals and staff setting their own goals, if we all align in the same direction, I have no idea what's going on with lights. If we all align in the same direction, we can do great work, right? We can actually move mountains. And so that's the importance of this sort of work. The strategic plan lays out the ESD's vision, the collective commitments that we've made together on how we're going to achieve that vision and the strategies that we'll take to get there. But that's where it ends. It doesn't go into details on how those strategies actually get implemented and how that work comes to fruition. That's where department action plans come in. Each department has identified strategies. They have strategies that they are working towards. They have high leverage actions that they're working on related to those strategies, and they'll spell out exactly who's doing what and when. And built into that is a monitoring of how that work is going. So there are multiple department action plans for many of our strategies. I wanted to show you that connective tissue between the two, and that tends to be the metrics that connect the two. So each strategy has one or more metric or goal associated with it. These goals are written by the departments to show the impact that they're having and to monitor that impact. So you'll see there's a metric and then there's an aligned department for each strategy. There are currently, as of yesterday, 85 metrics in our action plan. And I expect that to change a little bit as we go through the review process this month. We are still refining some of those and getting them finalized. As teams are developing their plans, they do have some guidelines to follow, and these are the guidelines that were provided. And then specifically, I want to call out some of the work that we did around drawing clear connections between our action plans and the strategic plan strategies. And this tool here that we have, we might even call this like a rubric for our action plans. Like when we review action plans, we're looking for these things, and teams are using this as a guide as they're developing those plans. All right, I wanted to point out, like I said, that clear connection between objectives, because one of the things that we've been working on this last year is shifting some of our action plan metrics. A couple of years ago, a lot of our metrics were things like how many people are participating, how many schools are participating, and whether or not people felt the PD was effective. Last year, our teams worked on creating rubrics similar to one above about what their program is supporting participants to learn and what it'll look like when those participants are able to implement that learning. So if the participants are implementing that, then students are going to benefit. This year, no, there's a student benefit. This year, we're seeing a lot more goals where we're looking for our teams to actually be implementing those strategies. And through a coaching and support that we're providing to school districts or to other staff, we're looking for this to grow and improve. And so that's what we're seeing in the way of goals. This kind of creates our theory of action, right? If we provide learning to teachers and other educators, teachers will change their practices and student learning will increase. And this is all rooted in that supportive coaching structure where our staff are providing support to school districts, participants in the professional learning, and then they're developing skills. The rubrics provide clear guidance around what school practices, classroom practices, the participants are going to learn, and then the coach can work with them to see what that looks like. So we're kind of getting all three pieces now as we're starting to develop this theory of action of you're participating, it's changing practice, and it's increasing outcomes. And so that big change for last year was in getting clarity around what those classroom practices are. I want to give you some examples. We've been calling those implementation goals, those classroom practices, process goals. And so through this work that we did last year, we're asking many teams to write those. It now means that we've essentially doubled the number of metrics that we're trying to track. But it does give a lot more clarity on where teams are and how they're progressing, how the participants are progressing. So there's some examples. For each one of the metrics, we do have a dashboard where we are keeping track of each quarter, what the progress looks like. Each of the 85 metrics has a record of progress. This allows us to quickly see our growth, and where we have historical data such as this one, we can see how we started last year versus how we started this year. You can see that we've improved so far how this is progressing this year, and we can expect the growth to continue. So that's kind of a broad overview of action plans and how they kind of work. Then I wanted to call out that, as we've been working on this year, we've been strengthening our action plan process and our strategic plan process. We're finding that it's going hand in hand with liberatory design. The design modes ask us to co-design with our communities, and we end up developing a lot of tools and resources around that co-design. So we started to organize them in a way that we can support each other. This led to what I'm going to call a very rough draft of a toolkit, which you can see on the right. We took each petal of that liberatory design flower and aligned it with potential activities and objectives. And if leaders clicking on those activities, it leads us to some suggestions on how to facilitate a diverse group of people in discussion and in decision making. So there's meeting agendas in there, there's protocols you can use that help you to move through this process of noticing where we're at, empathizing, defining a problem practice, and creating that action plan, and even monitoring it. That's one change that we've done this year, and it's already helping us to support the work of several teams around the ESD. Finally, I just want to share an example of reviewing data and adapting. So I showed you this guidelines earlier. This is essentially what we're looking for in action plans. And there are two strategies in the strategic plan directly related to action plans: to co-develop and to engage to embed family engagement strategies. Those are the two strategies adopted by the board. You can see where those appear in the guidelines. I've highlighted them here. And when Director McCarter and I reviewed our Chief Academic Officer, McCarter and I reviewed our progress on these goals last January, we recognized that we need to provide more support to our departments to be successful with these. So for the second half of the year, we provided multiple learning opportunities to the administrative council meetings related to community engagement and how it pertains to action plans, actionable ways people can implement strategies, and how to review that data. Through that effort, we've more than doubled the % of our plans that show signs of some co-development, and we're continuing to support that through this year. All right, we did a lot of talking about action plans, and I realized that we didn't give you an example of what the form looks like. So this is an example form. You can see that it's got some callouts from alignment to the strategic plan and how we're going to continue to grow and improve. These are meant to be living documents. That green section at the bottom just grows and changes as the team reflects and adds new action steps to it. They also can, at the end of each quarter, have an opportunity to reflect on what progress they've made, and that'll be facilitated at those administrative council meetings. And that's what this looks like. This is our plan for this year at the administrative council meetings. We are currently in November, so quarter one ended last week, and so we are gathering up all of the data on those 85 metrics, and that will be reviewed at the next administrative council meeting so that teams can reflect on the progress they've made and make adjustments to their plans. At the end of January, quarter two will end, and then we'll be conducting a stock take with members of cabinet and directors, and the results of which I'll be back to share with you at the March board meeting. So that was my broad overview of action plans, how they relate to strategic plan, and I am happy to take any questions you may have.
Well, thank you so much for that detailed information. I know that is a lot of work on the staff to gather all of that information and compress it and put it in a way that we can all understand. So thank you so much for that work. But with that, do board members have any questions? Dorian.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I could geek out on this kind of stuff all day long. I have a very simple follow-up question, and that is for board members who are looking to further steep ourselves in the concepts of liberatory design. Do you have specific resources that the district is, anchoring ourselves to that we should be reading or staying abreast of? Kind of just a list for resources or anything that y'all have used in the professional development space for folks to better understand liberatory design. How can we as board members also educate ourselves? What can we anchor to? This can be a list of links, or if you're like, read this or read that, that would also be welcome.
I'm going to say that's probably best answered through our Equity and Family Partnerships department. And so I'm going to leave it to Laura, or it looks like Superintendent Goldman's unmuted himself. Maybe you have more to share.
We have a ton of resources regarding our equity work, and this is an approach that we've been learning and working and growing on from the National Equity Project. So that's your first link. They're an outfit out of Oakland. I've worked with them in Hood River before I came to the ESD, and they've been helping us along our equity journey here as well. It's a way to democratize and engage broad sets of communities in decision making and growth. So yes, we have a ton of resources. We can get the board some. We also, Director Russell, we have as a board in the summer when we've done our board work sessions, we've leaned into that in the past. And so it's a good reminder to dust that stuff off again. And maybe this summer we'll take a little deep dive.
Any other questions? Well, again, we look forward to getting these updates, and it's so good to see a strategic plan that's being used and that we're diving into those metrics and rubrics. So thank you so much for that information. All right, with that, we will move on to attendance services update. Ryan?
Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Madam Chair, and the members of the board for a little time to talk about our attendance services, where we're at, where we're hoping to get. My name is Ryan Blasquez, and I'm assuming you can all see these slides. And Valerie, you're going to move through these for us?
That's it.
Okay, great. So my name is Ryan Blasquez. I support the attendance services and our bases teams, which you'll learn a little about that acronym in a second. But I wanted to shout out first my colleague, Whitney Wagner, who is a program administrator who's triple booked tonight and didn't plan to come and co-present because we were initially going to be in Tillamook. And I know she's listening and just want to give her some shine. She's been such a huge asset for our agency, doing a lot of stuff, and just been pivotal as we've had to evolve attendance services. The landscape's really kind of moved underneath our feet, and we're trying to be responsive and adaptive to a lot of things, and I'll share about that. But I just want to make sure that the board knows that Whitney's been a huge part of this. So next slide, please. And getting right to it, we have an attendance problem in the United States. You see here that coming out of the pandemic, absenteeism spiked, and we haven't been able to get kids back to being regular attenders. And this graph shows the percentage of chronically absent kids, which are students who miss more than 10% of instructional days. And we think about chronic absent percentages because that's this tipping point that starts to correlate with a lot of negative things in school experiences. And this graph only shows up through 22-23, obviously, but we know in 23-24, there's an estimated about 10 million chronically absent kids in the United States. Next slide. Oh, did we miss one? Okay. Well, drilling down a little bit, there was initially, I think, a state graph in there as well that showed Oregon. We haven't received the 23-24 data yet, but up through 22-23, Oregon's chronic absenteeism rate was at 38%, which is among the highest in the country. And you see that the graph showed our 10 largest districts in the state. And so we have a couple of those. There's some of our regional districts that are a little above that, a little below that. But none of it's great. And we know, even though we haven't received our 23-24 data, we haven't fixed this yet. And we know that from talking with educators, working with leaders, that absenteeism is still high on their list of needs and concerns and improvement planning. So an interesting part of that discussion, I think the board should understand, is that absenteeism happens most frequently on the bookends of our school systems. So our K-1-2 students are most absent, and our 10th, 11th, and 12th graders have the highest absenteeism in general. There's variability, of course, but those are such important years for a lot of reasons in our programming. And when we think about what Superintendent Goldman referred to with OSAS outcomes and the fact that Oregon also has some of the lowest literacy outcomes, it's not a surprise when they're missing so many learning opportunities. Next slide, please. Oh, there it is. There's the slide I was referring to. Okay, so I think I described that. Next one, Valerie, thank you. So what do we know? And Valerie, if you just want to click all the bullets so they show, that's okay. We know that since the pandemic, there we go. Kids haven't bounced back academically for a lot of the reasons I just referenced. Behaviorally, they've missed developmental opportunities. So we hear about disrupted learning and behavior challenges, again, lagging skills that students haven't had the opportunity to learn. Absenteeism persists across all demographics. It's impacting all students, and it's culturally contagious, meaning if you have a school community, a classroom community where absenteeism is the norm, you're going to get more of it. So not surprising there. And again, all these impact our ability to do what we need to do in schools. All right, next, please. Yeah. So it hasn't bounced back for a lot of reasons, and there's a growing body of research on this. But we know that cyclical behaviors lead to more absences. So a student who misses some instruction on Monday and Tuesday, they now walk back into the classroom without the foundational knowledge to be successful on a particular task, is going to lead to more anxiety and perhaps to more absences. Same with a student who is anxious or has other social emotional needs. The more that they're out of that classroom, they become less connected. And so these things compound themselves over time. There's a lot of blogs and podcasts and articles about how people's relationship with attendance has changed, which I find interesting, but I'm starting to come around to the idea that during COVID, kids and families experience trauma, and now parents are reporting they tend to keep their kids closer. And if they're at all worried or they see their student worried, they're going to keep them home more often. There's also the challenge we're battling with COVID normalizing absenteeism, right? We required it, and we required big chunks of it a lot of times. And I know that when I was in a principalship in an elementary school, it was always confusing about when a student should return, how we need to transition them back, what kind of communication needs to happen. I have a school-age son now whose parents still tell me that, my son tested positive and I'm not sure when they go back to school. So this is like a persistent communication issue with our systems. And so now we have really unhealthy core programs. So with 30 to 50% of our students absent, we can't really intervene our way out of it like we used to. And we often refer to this in like a medical analogy to describe these multi-tiered systems of support. So if you're a medical facility serving a community, you rely a lot on prevention of problems, right? Eat your vegetables and make sure you get exercise, get your checkups. And so, because we don't have the capacity for everybody to be in the ICU, right? And that's kind of what we're dealing with absenteeism here, is that we can't provide enough individualized intervention when we have this many kids missing school. So that's another part of this story and this challenge. I think maybe one more bullet there. Yeah, and I've already talked about that. There's a high correlation between absenteeism and then struggling with other things in school. Okay, next slide. So prior to 2023, our attendance services really functioned to move through this truancy process where we had some hourly services, and we still do, where districts can have us and our attendance advisors go out to kind of work and intervene in what's happening in the community that's the root cause of a child's absence. And so we would have initial referrals. There were a series of formal letters. We'd have mandatory meetings, and that could eventually lead to a citation, which again, when I was in an elementary school, I worked with the ESD and used this process when we kind of ran out of ideas and ran out of bandwidth. And the whole time we were also offering reconnection type of activities. And again, prior to 2023, this was a pretty successful model. Next slide, please, Valerie. There you go. But some things changed, like I mentioned to start here, it changed right underneath our feet. And all of a sudden we were kind of dealing with an antiquated model, really, where we paused truancy after COVID for good reason, for all the reasons that families were confused about school and attendance and how it was supposed to roll. We were able to continue the citation process for a while because we had a retired officer employed who, we had a special permission through the county to still use the citation. And we began as a state reconsidering truancy as we came out of COVID because of all the stuff I just outlined. We're all wrestling with this complex problem of absenteeism, and it kind of the pendulum swung, and Senate Bill 48 said, all right, we can bring the hammer, and it'll be, we can give up to a $2,000 fine. But educators and mental health providers and families gave a lot of feedback, and the Senate Committee on Education pulled that back and instead created a task force to dig into this work a little different and a little more. And that's kind of where we're at. The task force sunsets in January. We're kind of working in the collective. Whitney coordinates an ESD attendance specialist group across the state to do like a community of practice and lessons learned, and we're piloting things and we're trying stuff, and that's kind of where we're at as an agency as well. Next slide, please. So what do we do now? Oh, yeah, pause right there. So so what I outlined there with that MTSS and the medical model is we got this core problem. So our core instruction for attendance, our core supports for creating welcoming, inclusive, safe environments is out of balance. It's unhealthy, right? So instead of this triangle being mostly green, we have a lot of kids who are in crisis. We have other kids who have significant need, and our attendance is suffering as a result. Now you can click the rest of them there. It was going to be a dramatic animation as I move. Go ahead and click through. You can bring them all up. So our approach has been to address address the core, right? As opposed to those reconnection, citation, hourly services we provide. Again, we still have those as options for district, but we know they need more and different. They have a core instruction of an attendance core problem. And so we need to help our district partners find out who it's working for and who it's not, using data to determine what's next, bringing families into the conversation and problem solve. And that's all of our approach, and work through an MTSS lens, a multi-tiered system of support. And we know that a culture of attendance has to be fostered and sustained, and it takes work, and it's complex, and it takes teaming and a lot of different perspectives. We know that, our team knows that from being in buildings in recent years. We know that from working outside of buildings. Students need to want to be there. Families need to feel safe about their students being there. And then we can partner in the right ways. All right, next one. So again, just to reiterate, so each tier of MTSS, whether it be an intervention or again, those core supports that all kids get, require instruction and intentionality, meeting times. So the adults in the building are monitoring how effective the work is, using data to reflect and adjust as we go in those cycles of improvement in managing and maintaining strong culture in a building. All right, next one. And so that is how we prototype this new team, which is BASES. Instead of having more siloed kind of work where we just work on behavior or just work on attendance or SEL, this is that recognition of core culture and climate work is all of these are a part of that. And we know that absenteeism is a symptom of an unhealthy culture and climate in buildings. And we got to make sure it's working for most kids, because there are students and families who need a little more or different. But right now that looks like 30 to 50% of your school, if we're not using data and we're not thinking about those core supports for all kids. All right, next one. And so we have a 3-part series this year where we're bringing teams together. It has a waiting list. We offer an inland and coast professional development offering, and people are hungry for this work. They know working in schools as a counselor or dean of students or student success coach that things aren't working, and they're spinning trying to fix all kinds of things, and that they need to step back and think about infrastructure, the capacity, what is the leadership supports that they need in order to do this, and then those tier 1 supports for kids, what's effective in their school community, and how do they make sure that it's happening all the time, every day. And so this is a rubric that the team has created where they train on those high leverage practices. They have teams do some self-assessment so they know where they're starting at with a baseline. And then they know what to target first as far as an improvement plan for culture and climate work. And just a snapshot, I think this is what Superintendent Goldman talked about. The next slide. Yeah, so and this is just an example of how we're using data to then steer how we coach, what we provide to teams, where they might need support. And we had changed out the graphic because it had some school specific stuff and we didn't get explicit permission to do that. And so we wanted to kind of switch those. Whitney wanted to switch those things out, which was very smart. Okay, so next slide. And again, we still provide those attendance services, and those are still resourced by our partners with some of that more specific top of the triangle work with school team coaching, going and providing specific PD, and the STARS referrals specific to attendance, where we still are going out and can facilitate reconnection meetings with families, try to do some legwork connecting them to community resources they might need, et cetera. So those continue to be attendance services offerings. But again, we hypothesize that this is a broader problem and we need to think about it a little globally, try to understand the local context, and then narrow into what might be the challenge with getting students in the door. All right, next slide. And this is just a visual that Whitney created that's great, that kind of outlines and helps teams understand what we can do and how we can still support them with those hourly services. Next one. And this is our team, our attendance team, which is also part of the BASES team. And Brenda Calzadilla, she continues to work those STARS referrals and is part of the professional development with BASES and doing technical assistance for attendance team. Whitney still leads this work, but again, she wears a bunch of hats now. And Luis Hernandez, his role changes a little each year. He's actually working full-time via the LSP this year in Forest Grove, but he's a part of our team and our thinking, and he's able to help Forest Grove pilot a lot of the work that we're doing here across the region. So great team, really hopeful about some of the changes we've made. And again, I think the need and the want for this kind of larger culture and climate work is evidenced by all of these educators that want to be a part of this training and this kind of action research. We have, I think, the largest room in our service center is 80 people, and we have a large waiting list, and we've offered a coastal option as well. And now Whitney and her team are trying to convince us to rent out the Top Golf or some other larger venue in there. So that is our update. It's a lot of stuff, but I'm happy to talk more or answer any questions y'all may have.
Well, again, Ryan, thank you so much for that in-depth. I know it's a lot of staff work to put together all that stats and to be proactive. So it looks like our board has questions. So with that, we'll start off with you, Doug. Question?
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. That's very helpful. Just a couple quick questions. Just curious, this is always a difficult topic, but the percentage of chronically absent students that are dropped from school because of the 10-day drop. Are you seeing 10-day drops increasing because of the number of chronically absent students? I would imagine so, or are they sort of playing the system? So that's my first question. And the second question, sorry, is the BASIS program. I didn't catch how long it's been going, but even if it's just been going for a few months, are you seeing some changes with that? And so I'll go back under mute. Thanks.
Yeah. So the 10-day drop one, I don't know if I'm informed enough to give you a clear answer on that. I know Whitney might have more information. I can say that continues to be in the regs, right? If the kids aren't in the seat, we can't take the state funding for them. And so I know in my experience working with teams and being a principal that we had some checkpoints there and action items tied to the number of days. And I think teams are still actively tracking those days for those kids who are significantly absent, for those concurrent times. But I also think we have a problem of practice where we're tracking attendance as like our progress marker. So, 94% of our second graders are here this week. Let's celebrate that. But it doesn't tell us about the stories of those other 6 students that are missing all these academic opportunities. And so I think part of what BASES is doing, and this is its first year, we're prototyping based on feedback and co-design, is helping people dig into those like procedures and teaming structures, and how are we tracking the right data that tells us when we need to move on students and who are most at risk from not being in school. Do we know the stories? We train around empathy interviews and how to, co-plan with families on getting kids back to school, what type of accommodation they might need. So I think that's a winding answer maybe that doesn't get there, but I think with the 20 districts and the 200-ish schools that we support, I think we need some standardized approach to how we're monitoring attendance and how we're addressing absenteeism, especially when those kids are gone for 7, 8, 9 days and we're getting close to a drop.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Dorian?
Thank you. In your presentation, you mentioned that there's a bimodal distribution of kindergartners and first graders and juniors and seniors in high school being disproportionately represented in chronic absenteeism. Do you have like a self-reported data from families and students on the reasons why behind their chronic absenteeism, and how does that differ on each side of your bookend?
Yeah. Well, I think we hypothesize as a leadership group, and our regional superintendents are doing work around more CTE options, and Superintendent Goldman can speak to that, how we're thinking about those high school students, how to keep them engaged, how to keep them on track, and bought into, you know, the path that they're on towards graduation. That's a complex challenge in itself. The K-1-2 challenge is different all over the place. We have some students who have had a lot of illness, and then we have families who may leave before the bus arrives, and so kids aren't getting to the bus stop or getting to school. So we have to rethink maybe bus routes and times. But all of these things, I think, in those early grades come down to like communication, the families understanding how important attendance is and how absences add up, and what these absences are indicators of later on, the type of instruction they're missing. So does that answer your question?
So you're saying on one end of the spectrum, it's primarily an engagement issue, and on the other side of the spectrum, it's a value of education and transportation challenges. And do you have data to support that? I mean, you mentioned like empathy interviews and those sorts of things. Have we quantified and qualified kind of the drivers behind? I understand in concept.
Yeah.
How do we know?
So on in the high school settings, I'm not as familiar with that. I know that our superintendents have hypothesized for a bunch of reasons what they need to adjust. Have we quantified it through parent interviews and data? Yes. So our STARS referrals that I reference include some places where we can have a hypothesized root cause from the referrer, like a counselor in the building. And then as our attendance advisors go out and work with the family, we're constantly updating that data to make sure that we are dialing into what is the specific need. So a common one is transportation, where bus routes are not fitting with the morning routines of families. We have kids who are caregivers to their younger sibs, and then if it's not working in the morning and routines aren't getting followed, both those students aren't making it to school. We have some of the causes I referenced that are being more and more publicized in blogs and podcasts and things, like the relationship has changed. I don't feel safe. My student's worried about going to school. I'm not going to force it. So I think those are all, but we do have data that drives the work we do from our STARS referrals. But that's just that top of the triangle. I think there's a lot more stories to be told, right?
Can I just say one thing about some of this is we're talking about one of the more complex things that we are dealing with, right? Because it's not just only what the school does. These are community-based, widespread problems. But there is stuff that we in school districts really do that can accelerate attendance absences. So on the high school side, part of it is engagement and whether kids see the value of the school experience when they can't afford to go to college, but they're in seat work and they're being offered AP is the big creative thing in the school. So one of the things we're working on, and Paul knows this very well from his work at the community college, is really creating pathways for kids that are meaningful. They're connected to real aspirations after school, etc. Another thing that we do at high schools oftentimes is we have schedules that, like in a lot of schedules in Oregon, afford children about 32 credits if they went to every class and got the credits. But the graduation requirements in Oregon are 26 credits, right? So by the time a kid's a senior, oftentimes they don't have a full schedule. And we're asking for problems, right, in our communities when kids are not engaged in schools, et cetera. And so there's kind of like a lag there too. And it's one of those things that we bring on ourselves a little bit. So it is very complex stuff though. And yeah, so those are just some examples of the kinds of things that we're working to address.
All right, any other? Oh, Maureen?
I'll be fast. Thank you, Ryan, and it's great to see you. So just a couple things. I was in a meeting with my city hat on, but it was a TTSD around communities that care, but how do we help kids around a variety of adverse impacts in their lives? But Paul had mentioned, I don't know if he got a lens into some of the 23, 24 data, but it felt like there was some positive movement maybe in the younger grades. So I'm encouraged by that, in that exactly what you're talking about. How do we ensure we get our littles to school when they need to be? And then last spring I did a facilitation with some high school students, juniors and seniors, into what Dan said. I felt like their point, especially maybe with those longer periods, it's like they can get where they need to be. They don't necessarily have to be present, but hit the mark on the assignments or the work. And so they may or may not. And I think COVID, created that option, right, from a virtual lens. So it's just fascinating. I don't think I added anything, but the topic's so critical, and that it is complex, and it's driven by different needs, or, certainly by ages. But I was encouraged, hopefully, that especially our younger grades, that value of why being in school every day is so critical. So appreciate all the hard work you're doing in your team. So thank you so much, Ryan.
Yeah, of course. The complexity is, I think, compounded too when you're supporting a school community, and every spring, like 100 of your fifth graders, and you're like, those families that have been with you and understand the importance and have heard the communication, then they go off and you bring in 100 new kindies, and just that the maintenance of that communication, the maintenance of the work, like sustaining that feedback loop around how important it is. It's a complex thing when all things are normal, and we're kind of battling back from something. So yeah.
And I just say, I know the state put on full statewide, every day counts. We had a big, campaign everywhere with all the districts. There were PSAs on the TV, and, to get, but we also, I just always find it so interesting when we know we all lived with COVID in our workplaces everywhere. It just sometimes a lot of it's like Oregon is the only state that lived through that, and we're not the only state that lived through that. And other states are rebounding from that. And I hope whether there can be some best practices that other states are finding that are working for them, because every state lived with COVID and trying to get that back on track. And the same thing goes with our workplaces. We changed our culture of how we operated in our communities with every single day. So it's not really just a question. It's just more of an observation that I hope that we can learn from what's working in other states as well.
Yeah, so true.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us this evening. That great presentation.
Sure.
Yeah, Dan?
Sure.
Tim, check, Ernest has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ernest. You moved squares there. I'm sorry. Yes, Ernest.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So, Ryan, wonderful presentation, amazing work. I very much appreciate everything that you're doing. So, Portland State University and Portland Community College just finished the joint study. I was looking at their data a couple of hours ago. They just released it internally, and I'm on that board, so I'm able to kind of get access to it. But they were focused on retention, and they did a study asking 800 individuals across the state who either left college or left community college or never went to a community college. Hey, why not? So, why'd you leave? Why did you, choose not to come? And, I think it was, and then one of the things that I saw that really stood out to me in the data is that 49% of these people who either left college or left community college or decided not to go, 49% of them are parents. So that really stood out to me. In addition to a lot of other data, I think that you might find value in getting your eyes on this, on their reasoning and just kind of understand. Hey, look, like why did they not continue on? Because it might help you with that, or it might help you with the far side of your bookend. Meaning that it might give you insights of hey, look, how can I encourage this person to see a bright end so that they're hopeful about coming to school today. And so that might give you some insight there. And I'm also wondering, hey, look, being that 49% of these people are parents, that how could it help your dialogue with parents to also, begin to, just kind of pass that hope on, right? So if you're interested in that, I'll be happy to get that data over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. Know better, do better, right? Like we're always needing to find most information we can. Thank you.
Great. Any other? Don't want to miss anybody. Okay, well, thanks again, Brian, for bringing us that information. So next up is the first read of policy EBBA. Debbie?
Good evening, board. I wish it's always tough following my colleagues. They do such a good job. And tonight, I have for you the first reading of a policy, student health services. It is recommended by OSBA that there actually be a specific health plan in place. And if you look at the proposal for the first aid policy to be deleted, it is rather brief when compared to the proposed new policy. As you take a look at that new policy, I've left it exactly as OSBA presented it with a few changes. If you look on page 2, the recommendation is not to list specific positions which are required to maintain CPR and first aid cards. The ESD has a wide variety of health professionals on staff, and those change fairly regularly and locations. We do meet the requirement to have first aid and CPR trained staff. And then the remainder, the choices that are available to the board include those things that are in brackets. And I left the license requirement for the positions for those who are nurse practitioners, or LPNs, because those are requirements of the positions. Felt like that is a good recommendation to include that. And then we do provide the product dispensers in restrooms as required by law. And so it is the first reading for the board's consideration.
All right. So with that, are there any questions about the new policy? Are we good with the way it was presented? All right. Well, there we go.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. So we'll see that again on the consent agenda probably next month. So, all right. The last report and discussion is administrative reports. Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Such a wide range of things that we do at the ESD. When I look through these, I'm like, wow, like it's just amazing. Without going into any of these in detail, there's a lot for the board to chew on. I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have about the work happening in these various departments.
Anybody have any questions after looking at the information? Again, it is a surprised on how many things we are doing at that ESD. Yeah, yes, Chris.
Just one minor comment, which I was particularly interested in the early learning one, but it's full of acronyms that I thought I've been around for a long time, but I had no idea what they were. So just a suggestion.
Duly noted.
Chris, what will we do in education without making an acronym for every single thing that we do? I will make sure that our team spells those things out for folks, and I'll take a look now and through that one myself.
Way to keep us honest, Chris. Way to keep us honest. So, all right. With that, we're going to move into action items. And the first order of business is the October 2024 financial report. Jordan.
All right, I'm here. Thank you, Chair Timchuk. Members of the board, it's good to see you all again. I was looking forward to seeing everybody in Tillamook, but also appreciate not having to drive the highway out there in the rain tonight. So totally understand us being on Zoom and appreciate you letting me join in. So got the financial report first, and then a purchase authorization request. On the financial report, there's not a ton to report. One of the main things I wanted to apprise the board of is that we are still waiting on amendments for our EIECSE and RISE grants. We are only waiting on the amendments for the federal funding at this point, so we are able to make claims against those grants for the state funding. We just do not yet have access to the federal funding. We have received indication of what we should expect for the federal funding, which is unfortunately lower than I anticipated. When I estimated what the federal funding would be for the second year of the grant, I estimated a mild increase. There was some indications I felt from the current administration that there would be a bit of an increase to IDEA funding. And unfortunately, they flat funded us. And so, and then because of our proportional share of students, that actually meant a slight decrease for us instead of an increase, resulting in almost $1 million swing for us. So we are working on dealing with that. At this time, we do not expect any additional changes to our staffing levels in the program to deal with that problem. But it is just yet another blow to a program that has already had a really difficult couple of years. But it is not affecting the wait for the amendment is not affecting cash flow at this point because we are able to claim state grants. We won't need to claim the federal funding really probably until the last month of operating the program. So as long as we get that amendment before May, we won't have a problem with cash flow on that program or regional inclusive services. On the general fund, we do have our revenue. I've already reported our revenue is down because of state school fund adjustments, but there's now been another reduction to our revenue assumption for the year. There's two reasons for that. The first is, I completely lost my train of thought, so I'm going to go to the second one. The second one is that we just decided to change. It's just a technical thing where instead of paying positions out of the general fund and then charging grants for those positions, we have some positions that we've just moved into the grants where we have more stable funding in our grants. We've just moved those positions over. What that means is that we're not going to bring revenue into the general fund to pay for those, but we're also not going to pay the expense. So the decrease in revenue assumption has been completely offset by a decrease in expenditure assumption. And then I completely lost my train of thought, and so I apologize. Oh, no, it's in the written report. My apologies. We received some of our prior year taxes. So these are taxes that got paid late by individuals. We received those taxes before we completed our audit. And so we booked those into 23-24 because we are on a modified accrual basis of accounting. We recognized revenues when they were owed to us, not when the cash was actually received. So we received the cash in the last month, but we booked it into 23-24. In a normal year, we will generally get those late taxes after we've done the audit. And so we book them into 24-25, because once the audit is closed, we can't then book it into 23-24. So we would normally book it into 24-25 as a collection of prior year taxes. In this case, we booked it into the prior year. What that means is we have a higher beginning fund balance, but I reduced the revenue assumption commensurately. So overall, doesn't change our cash position, doesn't change our financials, does make our beginning fund balance look a little healthier than it did before. Other than that, there is not really any significant change in the performance of any of our funds. We continue to spend money out of our capital projects fund to support the new early learning center in Hillsborough, as well as the metal art classroom in St. Helens. And other than that, really no substantial changes from the last report, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Questions? Questions? The only question I have is, Jordan, you made reference to those positions that you changed from general fund to reflect more if they were a grant position and moved it over to as a grant expense. I guess my question is, when we're figuring out budgeting for the next time around, if they're under grant expense, if we don't, for some reason, don't receive that grant, how do we make sure that we capture that position?
That's a great question. Even when we book them in the general fund, they're still grant funded positions because we're using grant funding to pay for them. This just reduces the number of journal entries we do to account for those positions. And so there are some positions where we leave them in the general fund. Those are the types of positions that might be supporting multiple grants, where accounting for them in each individual grant becomes just sort of technically challenging. We will put that kind of a position into the general fund and then charge a fee to the grant, to each of those individual grants for that position. In this case, the positions we're talking about are completely funded by one or two grants. And so coding them into the general fund and then invoicing those grants internally and then tracking all those payments actually takes more work and has, when I say more work, I'm not talking about like that it's just too much quantity of work. It's every time a human touches something, we have an opportunity for error. And so when I'm making decisions about where I want and how I want to account for things, it really has to do with minimizing our opportunities for error. And of course, primary impact is making sure that we are clearly indicating how we're paying for things. And so in this case, because these positions are exclusively funded by one or two grants, making the accounting aspect of it easy, booking them directly into the grant, I think actually makes it clearer what these positions are and how they're funded. So from a transparency perspective and then from an operating perspective, it just made more sense to have these specific positions booked directly into the grant instead of invoicing the grants. Superintendent Goldman.
And I would just assume every time you do have someone different that has to touch it, you're adding to your overhead of the overall. So that makes sense. Thank you for that explanation. Dan?
Oh, I think one of the parts of your question, Becky, is, so if we don't have the grant funds, how are we gonna, basically sustain these positions that are really doing general operations? We won't be able to. So if we get big reductions in our large contracts that are picking these positions up, we adjust the grant just like we would if the position was booked in the general fund. So it's just a simpler way to track things this way.
Get it. All right. Any other questions about the financials? Is there a motion?
I move we approve the financials as presented.
Russell, second.
All right. It's been properly moved and seconded that we accept the financials as presented. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstain? With that, the motion passes. Thank Thank you, Jordan. I'll let you roll right into the next order of business.
All right, thank you. This one is a little more fun, a little less dry than a financial report. We are getting to a place where we are thinking about how to furnish our new early learning center in Hillsborough. And so when we're looking at lead times and when we need to get this order placed so that we can furnish the building as soon as the construction's done, now is about the time that we need to get this furniture ordered. So the method of procurement that we used for this particular procurement so that we could move at a little bit faster clip was we reached out to 3 vendors that we have worked with before so that we know that they deliver high quality both product and service, because this is an installed quote that we have. So the vendor will be providing installation of the furniture. And all 3 of these vendors have won competitive contracts through competitive processes done with cooperative procurement agencies. And all of those cooperative procurement agencies meet the standards of Oregon's competition standards. And so this is a situation where to meet the legal procurement standard, we could have just gone directly to one of these vendors. They've already met the competition requirement that the state of Oregon has. And so, but we still wanted to make sure that even with those, we still got the best value for the agency. So we reached out to 3 different vendors, received 2 quotes back. The other vendor said that they just weren't interested in doing it. The job wasn't big enough in the context of all of the other school construction projects happening right now. And so our recommendation is that we go with One Source Office Interiors, who gave us a quote around $609,000, which is less than what we were expecting at $680,000, which is what I reported to the board at the last meeting. We did receive a question about this, and my goodness, I don't know where my brain is today.
The question was about, oh, go ahead, Maureen. It was the question, Jordan, was about repurposing the furniture from our current facility.
Thank you. I'm really sorry. I don't know where my brain is at tonight. So oh my gosh, I just lost it again. Dan, so sorry.
So it's about why wouldn't we repurpose?
Oh, the repurposing. Yeah. So we did look at repurposing. The estimate that we got was that it would be a little over $300,000 to take the furniture that we have at the Washington Service Center, disassemble it, move it, reassemble it. And then that particular, the architect did not provide us with an estimate of how many of the pieces of furniture they didn't think would survive that moving process. And so we would expect it to actually be higher than that estimate that we received. We also were told to expect about a 3 to 5 year life expectancy on the furniture that we moved, whereas on the new furniture, we're expecting 10 to 20 years life expectancy. So when we amortize those costs over those 2 time periods, the new furniture was actually a more, let's say, fiscally conservative option than going with the moved furniture. The value add that comes with leaving the furniture at the Washington Service Center is that then we have that furniture at the Washington Service Center for whatever we might need there as well.
Jordan, thank you. I think that it makes total sense, and just really appreciate the research that was done, and you obviously already thought about that, and really support the decision going forward. But thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
It reminds me of any of us that have had to move kids from college or from apartment to apartment. Is it worth the cost of moving it, or just buying new stuff? It's just really sad that we've come to that. Any other questions about the furniture? All right, with that, a motion.
I move we approve the furniture purchase as presented.
And seconded by Ernest. All right, it's been properly moved and seconded that we accept the approval to purchase the furniture for the new early learning center. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, with that, motion passes unanimously. Next order of business is electing the 2024 OSBA board members for positions 15 and 20. Superintendent?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. Upcoming here are a set of OSBA actions. The first one here is around election of board representatives from our region. Notice that the two open positions are from the Washington region. However, just because we are a regional board, everybody on this board has a vote for those positions. So our board, you don't have to worry about if you're Doug out on the coast. This board gets to vote on these positions as a whole. You'll see the materials involved here, and there are one applicant for each open position. So with that, I'll leave it to the board for discussion.
Any discussion? The only thing, I'll give, there's several of us here on the board that know both of these individuals, both know Christy Kotke and Nancy Thomas. And so they've been in the positions, they've been representing Washington County very well on the OSBA board. We saw them at the regional roadshow. So I'm in full support of reelecting them to their position. So with that, a motion?
I move we re-elect the two incumbents to the OSBA board position.
It's been moved.
Second.
Seconded by Ernest, that we elect the new positions to positions 15 and 20 on the OSBA board. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? With that, the motion passes unanimously. Next order of business is the 2024 OSBA resolution number 1. Superintendent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask Jordan to be brought back in here. Valerie, if you can pull him back in, just in case the board has any questions about this resolution and its impact on our budget. So as Valerie does that, I'll just let you all know what you're looking at. OSBA is proposing and asking for approval from its member school boards and ESD boards and community college boards for rate increases. According to OSBA, they haven't done a rate increase for quite some time. Don't remember the exact date, but I think it's been about 15 years or so. So I think that might be right. A long time, and I'll check my
25.
I was going to say, it's been over 20.
Okay, I was going to say, I'm going to check my facts here, but about 25 years. So that's a long time, obviously. The proposal is an increase of 15% for the first 5 years, and then a 4% in the following year. And I believe and so you can see the impact to our dues here. And if there are any questions or conversations with the board, of course, Jordan is here to talk about if you'd like to know kind of the impact on the budget.
Any questions, discussion? Well, again, not that I'm without opinions. I just wish I definitely, I'm going to be voting in favor of this because I do believe that there is value added for us to be represented by the OSBA and be a part of the OSBA and be a part of that advocacy, which is so important. I just wish that we'd been, that we could have been more strategic and spread it out a little bit more, and especially to those smaller school districts when there are so many things that are hitting their budget at once. This is a big ask in my book. I understand it. I just think it's a big ask, and I am grateful that the ESD has it in their budget to be able to withstand. I don't know if all school districts are going to be able to make that choice. So with that, any other discussion? Okay, I'll take a motion. Chris?
I move we approve resolution 1 from OSBA.
2. Resolution 2, Chris.
Resolution 2.
Oh, that's resolution 2. Sorry.
Yeah.
Russell, second.
What about Valerie?
Oh,
What do you?
I'm sorry. That was resolution 1. I
Okay.
apologize, Chris. You had it wrong.
You had it right, Chris.
Okay.
So just do it all over again for the record.
Sorry.
I move we approve resolution 1 from OSBA.
Okay. Is there a second?
Russell, second.
All right. Been properly moved and seconded that we approve OSBA resolution 1. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstain? With that, the resolution passes unanimously. All right. OSBA resolution number 2, Superintendent.
Thank you again. So resolution 2 is to establish a caucus for the OSBA, and the OSBA board is recommending its member districts, etc., to adopt this resolution, effectively establishing a pride caucus. This will be the 3rd caucus for OSBA. There's a board member caucus of color, and then there is a rural caucus, and this would create a 3rd caucus under the Pride caucus. And you can read in the resolution all the what that is about. Obviously, the important thing from a governance perspective for the board is that this adds voting rights and increases the size of the board by 1 and adds a voting member to the OSBA board. It also adds a voting member to the Legislative Policy Committee, which is another function, an important function of OSBA. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Any questions?
I have a comment.
Yes, Dorian.
As a non-binary member of this board and a queer person, I think representation matters, and I'm really happy that this has teeth and power behind it. And I would urge my fellow members to vote yes on this. I will be. And I think it sends a strong message to students who are experiencing more vitriol and anti-queer hate than we've seen in previous years. And I think that this sends a strong message of support and belongingness in our school systems.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I just would add, thank you, Chair, that I agree with Dorian and I support the caucus, but as a prior board member for many years, the board now is a pretty hefty size. I mean, it certainly has state representation, but I think at this point, does it say, Becky, I can't remember. I mean, this puts board membership 22, 23 something, and then LPC, getting close to 50. So from a staffing and a management, and so that's maybe a bigger question about how regional board members are representing, et cetera. So mine's more holistically as an organization, but certainly supporting, if we support rural in that capacity and our board members of color to do the same for the LGBTQI. I'm like Jordan tonight. I'm stumbling over really important acronyms, but I support the caucus.
Paul?
Thank you, Chair Timchuk. Yeah, I also wholeheartedly support this. I agree with Member Russell that, statements matter, words matter, but voices matter even more. And I think being able to have a recognized voice of a historically marginalized and increasingly targeted group present, I think speaks volumes for the youth that attend our schools. And I also think sets a model for other school boards to follow that might not be as accepting as our board or the OSBA board as well.
All right. Any other discussion? Motion?
I move we accept OSBA resolution number 2.
Russell
second.
second.
Oh, Russell second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded that we accept OSBA resolution number 2. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? With that, the motion passes unanimously. All right, our final order of business for the evening is OSBA resolution number 3. Superintendent?
Thank you again, Madam Chair. This is the third resolution proposed by the OSBA board and their administration. You'll see in your materials quite a number of edits. Obviously, I'm not going to walk you through all the red line and etc. On the resolution itself, it lays out what the board and administration of OSBA feel are the big items. So I think it's fairly clear what the major impacts are, but it is quite a number of edits and revisions. So with that, happy to try to help the board through that if it has any further questions.
Are there any questions or discussions? All right. Motion?
I move we approve OSBA resolution number 3.
Is there a second?
Russell second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded that we approve OSBA resolution number 3. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? With that, OSBA resolution number 3 passes unanimously. Now, any board member comments this evening? The only thing I will say is I will thank the board members, Director Russell, Director Graham, Director Wolf, Director Riley for attending the Oregon, it was my first the Oregon Association of ESDs. Was that the right thing?
You nailed it.
Okay. Thank you for spending the day and getting to know our other ESD members and Doug, I'm sorry, you were on the screen. So thank you for taking the time to participate. For those of you that couldn't join us and for those of you that couldn't join us for dinner, I hope next time it's great fellowship and to get to know each other a little bit better. So I'm sure the superintendent will be happy to pick up the tab again coming up in the future. So so thank you for arranging that. And then also the directors that were able to make 1 or 2 or 3 days of the OSBA conference. I think it's just good for the ESD to be represented. We are a member of the OSBA. There's lots, as the superintendent already pointed out, there is so much important advocacy. And the more that we can be on message, that we can be in alignment, that we can be giving the same talking points, and the staff is doing such a good job with that. I think we will be a stronger organization and we will be a stronger voice for the most important thing, and that is for the kids and the children of Oregon. So, so I appreciate you folks. I know we asked so much already of your time, and I thank you so much for giving additional time for us to be a stronger ESD for it. So, with that, then, if there are no other comments, we will be meeting the next time, December 11th, virtually. Again, I know Valerie will send us, how to get on and that sort of thing in our board packet. But I'm very grateful to all of you. I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving, however way you choose to observe that with your family and friends. And with that, we are adjourned.